Let's start recording anyway. Oh, but it's relevant. They apparently have replaced the Godzilla statue that's in front of Toho Screen and Stage Studios.
Wow, really?
They
Really?
put they replaced the iconic Heisei, Heisei, however you pronounce it. I murdered that name anyway. But the statue, I think it was the original one, with a Shin Godzilla.
Oh, wow.
So
Interesting.
some people are upset, some people are sad.
You're always going to get fanboys that are butthurt.
What? No. Never.
Have you seen photos, Mark? Does it look cool?
Yeah, the statue looks awesome.
Right on, man.
The original statue was the one, I think, from yeah, it looks like it was the original one or the one from 85 maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar enough with the periods. I think it's Godzilla 85, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So it's replaced with the Shin Godzilla, but yeah, and there was also a cool video that was out there about the progression of Godzilla and the various sizes.
Yeah,
Godzilla
wasn't
had.
that interesting?
Yeah.
I really didn't realize there were so many incarnations. I mean,
Oh yeah, I knew there were incarnations because there were different suits. I didn't realize quite the size difference
yeah,
among all of them. So that surprised me quite a bit. Was the size difference in
Yeah,
them?
didn't it? I mean, Godzilla started out relatively small because,
Well,
the buildings were relatively small at that time in Japan, and then it kind
right.
of, wow.
Well, we talked about that on the 85 film, how Godzilla kind of changed sizes throughout the film, but there were a few, there's this one main set piece in the third act where the buildings are taller than Godzilla, and it's like, I don't know how I feel about that. I know Glenn was a little taken with that too. It's like, I don't know. It's, it's supposed to be really like, he's supposed to be bigger than the buildings, just tower over everything, but
Nah.
it is what it is. Yeah, you talk about fanboys. Oh man, you know what's coming. You know what's coming. Avengers Infinity War.
Oh, yes.
We'll probably do an episode on it, but wow, you just prepare yourself for fandom ooze all over the place.
Yeah, it's
It's going to be crazy. I'm going to be interested to see which superheroes make it out of that film alive and which ones don't, because they've been keeping it. I got to admit, they've kept it fairly obscure of who's going to be out and who's going to be in because of cast announcements and such. Because we've talked about that before too, where you kind of lose the tension of, will this hero actually die? Because, oh no, that's right, they've signed on for 3 films. So
Sheldon actually has his running tally list of who he expects to be killed off based on contracts and story. And
well, I figure Captain America's gone. Cap, I think, is going to be gone. They might keep him around for the other sequel that they suddenly removed the title from, and instead of being Infinity War Part 2, it is untitled Avengers movie. Because from what I've heard, if they gave the title they want to actually give that movie, it would spoil this movie.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I'm thinking everybody loves Iron Man. He's been everywhere, but he has been a representation of this arc all the way through. I really suspect Iron Man's gone.
Yeah, I can see just,
we know that
I don't follow all the stuff, but it would seem like Downey is gotta want to do other things despite the money. I mean, geez.
It just
they keep posting things about, they keep releasing things about how he wants to do Sherlock Holmes 3, and that's not exactly new.
Yeah.
No, he's been wanting to do that for a while, and I actually liked his Sherlock Holmes films.
I did too. I really did too.
They were a lot better than I thought they had any right to be, but they were entertaining. But at the same time, just what he represents as character, I fully expect Iron Man's going to biff it because they've been playing with his psychology for so long too, and they did in Ultron. If you look at just the Avengers stories, he broke pretty much. He broke pretty much after Avengers 1 with the nuke, and then Iron Man 3, he pretty much was PTSD. And then you get in another Avengers where it's Ultron and it's his fault. So, you're going to get, I think he's going to die. I think Iron Man's dead. He's going to die in the Infinity War in some heroic fashion, but Robert Downey Jr. is gone. Possibly.
Yeah, I don't think they will ever follow the story arc of where he became an alcoholic.
No, because it hits too close to
it's too close to art imitating life with Downey.
So
they did a little bit of it in Iron Man 2, kind of, but barely, yeah.
I suspect he's going to die. We've got Ant-Man and Wasp, but apparently the Ant-Man and Wasp film, though it's being released after Infinity War, actually takes place before Infinity War.
Huh.
So
interesting. Okay.
Because they were showing trailers for Ant-Man versus Ant-Man and Wasp, and I'm watching it going, wow, the world seems pretty intact if, you had Infinity War.
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, Cap's gone. Possibly Thor? I don't know. Maybe Thor. Nah, Thor will probably stick around because Ragnarok actually did well. So, and Black Panther. I think Doctor Strange will be around because I think he signed on for another film. But some of the original ones, possibly Hawkeye and Black Widow. Who knows? But hi, Glenn.
Hi.
I'm just trying to build a death list for Avengers Infinity War.
Deadpool, that would be called.
That'd be the Deadpool. No, that's a though that one the latest, because I watched the latest trailer and I'm like, okay. I'm still though, for all the complaining people did of other big CGI bosses, big baddies, still not digging the look of Brolin's Thanos, but there's something off with it, but that's just me. I'm not a huge Marvel fan, so it doesn't really matter to me, but
yeah,
just looking at him, I'm like, wow, where's the practice? Huh?
Marvel's the best. DC sucks.
Okay, Glenn. Everyone's
except for the good ones.
Except for the good ones, exactly.
Everyone's entitled to their opinion, Glenn. Glenn, you got any idea who you might see, or who do you think is going to die in Avengers Infinity War?
Thanos.
Yeah. You think so?
That is all.
Just Thanos. Nah, I personally would have loved them see. Huh? Storm.
Reed Richards.
Reed Richards.
Logan.
The Invisible Girl thing. They're all gonna die.
Man. I think they should have Squirrel show up at the end and just beat Thanos with 1,000,000 squirrels.
Squirtle
Girl. That would rock. They're supposedly doing a series for Squirrel Girl. Supposedly. So we've been told. But
I'd be all over that.
Squirrel Girl?
Yeah. And they gotta do it. They'd be nuts not to.
Yeah, I agree.
At this point, they've established it now to where anything is pretty possible, and you'll be able to sell it to at least there's going to be an audience out there for sure. Because you've got a whole generation now that's grown up on comic book films. So, but we are not here to talk about comic book films, so let's get rolling. Here to talk about
totally a comic book.
That's true. Godzilla could totally be a comic book. So, Let's roll on this motherfucker. All right. Let me get myself situated here.
Just one second, Mark. I'll be back in 1 second. No, it's okay, honey. Just want to get a glass of water.
Well, hurry up, dang nabbit. We got some stuff to talk about
We
with.
have exactly 43 minutes to do
An
this.
hour.
You have what?
Exactly 43 minutes for this.
You only
All
have,
right, I'm back.
Give or take a half hour to an hour.
you only have 43 minutes of this? Okay.
Yeah. Give or take half hour to an hour.
Oh, okay. Nice. All right, well, let's get started, folks. Yes, folks, welcome to the spoiler room. We are marching our way through Godzilla month, and I hadn't planned it this way. I just picked films that just had Godzilla in the title and no verses, but it looks like this whole series is going to be ended up being Godzilla films that were released in the US. And last week we talked about Godzilla 1985, which was a edit of a Japanese film called The Return of Godzilla. But we go ahead now from 85 to 1998, and America has decided to make its own Godzilla film. Yes, that's right. It has 16% on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.3 out of 10 on IMDb, and 1.5 out of 4 for Ebert.com, which I'm sure there's a good reason for that, which we will dive into tonight. Yes, we're talking about Godzilla, or as many people refer to it, Zilla from 1998. And tonight I've got a great crew with me to talk about this. First off, he is back with us, Mr. Cole Meredith here. Hello, Cole. How are you?
I am fantastic. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. You were here last week to talk about the cheesy American edit. Now we're here to talk about another form of Godzilla film. And next to Cole is the always fantastic diva of the spoiler room herself, Dawn. Hello, Dawn.
Hello, Mark. Good evening, gentlemen.
Glad to have you in here. Be interested to hear your take on this film. And next to her is the one, the only, the BFD himself, Mr. Glenn Bittner. Hello, Glenn.
Hi.
Are you ready to talk some Zilla?
Always.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you in the room. And yes, we are talking about Godzilla 1998. Now, did one of you guys want to give the summary of this? Glenn, would you like to? Or would you like me to read the I am Dibim explanation?
Matthew Broderick likes worms. He finds worms that are really big. That means there's a giant lizard that's going to attack New York.
Wow. It's sad that almost sums up this main plot of this film. Anyone else want to add anything to that, Dawn? Or does that sum it up fairly well?
There's a reporter from Matthew Broderick's past that wants his giant worms.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of worm envy in this one.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
A lot of worm envy. Oh, yes. We have the giant reptile, only he's not wreaking havoc in Japan. He makes his way from the South Polynesian Islands.
French Polynesian Islands.
Polynesian Islands, all the way to New York. He, by way of the Panama Canal, apparently, because he knows the map and says, oh, hey, that'll be an easier trip. But yes, Godzilla basically in New York. Matthew Broderick is the scientist and put in charge, and he has various things happen over the course of 2 hours and 20 minutes. We're going to go into a few things of this film tonight, but first off, let's go down the list and let's just get initial reactions or their early thoughts with Godzilla 98 when they first saw it. Cole, we'll start with you.
When I first saw it on the big screen, I had only seen a couple of Godzilla movies. at that point. As I said last week, I think I'd seen King Kong versus Godzilla, and then Godzilla 1985, and I saw the original somewhere along the line early on, but I can't remember when. So I didn't have this strong like attachment to the look of Godzilla. So I was able to go in with a bunch of friends and enjoy it. And my dad, who grew up with the original movies, absolutely, loved it. He bought the VHS and would watch it once a week for a couple of years there. I'm sure I'm exaggerating, but he watched it a hell of a lot. So I saw this movie a lot, and I would say things like, Dad, but doesn't it bother you that, that they're ripping off Jurassic? What about all these little Velociraptor Godzillas? Doesn't that bother you? And he'd say, well, Godzilla kind of has to change with the times. And, that he just kind of forgave it for all its faults. So I grew up not really knowing what to think of it, but the more Godzilla movies I saw, the more I realized, well, whoever made that movie, they may have been doing what they thought was cool, but they certainly didn't, hold any reverence over the original films. And watching it again a few days ago, and I did a recap a couple hours ago, but it is a long film to watch twice in a week. Watching it again tonight, I had a different reaction, but I'm sure we'll get into that too. I actually did not mind it tonight for whatever reason. Might be nostalgia, might be the summer of 1998. I saw just about everything that was released in the theaters. I think The Truman Show and Blade and Deep Impact and Something About Mary. I mean, it was a fun summer for movies, so that may have played into my reaction tonight. But I'll tell you, the credits rolled tonight, and I thought, man, aside from the look of its head, it's not a bad monster loose in the city movie for the era it was made.
No, it's not, and we'll get into it a little more. But you bring up some good points with it, and yeah, we'll get into it a little bit. But you made some great points that we're gonna explore in a little while. But first, I want to get Dawn's her first time watching this film.
So when I saw this, I'd seen all the available Godzillas. Sheldon and I were he bought the box set. He was very into all this given where he grew up. So when we saw this, we both really thought it was fun. We both enjoyed it quite a bit. Our kids were just at an age where they could appreciate the monster movie aspect, and it kind of opened the door for them and they started watching the Godzilla cartoon with Godzuki, and they really wanted to see everything Godzilla. So it was a great doorway for them. I've always thought it was a fun movie. I thought that it was I'd never understood the venom with which it was received, because it was never intended to be an improvement on the Toho Studios, the original Godzilla. It was supposed to be a reimagination of it for a more modern time. They weren't trying to improve on Godzilla. They were trying to adapt it to a modern time in a modern place. And I appreciated that a lot. And it kind of made me sad later on when they released the more recent wide release of Godzilla, that they backpedaled so badly, because I think a lot of the fan base was so busy comparing the old Japanese version of Godzilla that they weren't even paying attention to what they were given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
That being said, there's a lot of bad in it.
There is a lot of bad in it. Yeah, and again, some points you make as well are ones I want to explore a little bit. We won't necessarily, folks, be going scene by scene with this film, mostly talking about the good, the bad of the film. and some of our thoughts and things that occur in this movie more so than break it down scene by scene, because it is a rather long film. And we'll go to the BFD now. Glenn, you are a major Godzilla fan. How did you feel when you first saw Godzilla 98?
I walked into the theater. Now, I already knew what Godzilla looked like.
Because of the toys, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I accepted it, but fine, whatever. Of course, they're going to CGI it. It's America. It's the day of, rubber suits is long gone in America. So I didn't have a problem with that. My one fear when I walked in the theater is, I just hope they don't Jurassic Park this son of a bitch. And then I walk out of the theater and I'm like, God damn it. They Jurassic Park the son of a bitch. They totally did. And Cole mentioned the fucking basically baby Godzilla Velociraptor. So I'm like, son of a bitch. There's one baby Godzilla. His name is Godzuki. He's there for comic relief and he blows smoke rings. That's what he does. There's Godzilla does not run away from helicopter with machine guns. What is that? What is that? On top of the fact that Godzilla doesn't run.
No. He does. He couldn't run. This is the only Godzilla I've ever seen actually.
He sprints. I'm like fast. On top of the fact that I'm like, New York must have the strongest roads ever made.
Never sinks down.
How he doesn't tear into every sewer and subway tunnel he walks across. I mean, that's a lot of weight. A lot of weight.
Well, it's the big foot that he has. It disperses the weight more.
Uh-huh. Tell you what, go step on a shoebox and see how big your foot disperses the weight before that box collapses.
Especially because they established that he's crawling around through all those tunnels.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
making those holes bigger.
Crawling around underground as well, which I'm like, what? So, I mean, it's like, I don't know, what is he? I mean, is he a decathlon runner? Is he now, is he a mole? What is he? I don't understand. No, Godzilla shows up. He's like, yo, I'm here. You fire a bomb in his face. He's like, pa! And then he blows up your city. And then some scientist comes up with some funky way to make him go away or quote unquote kill him. Nope. And he can swim super fast as well. And it's like super agile. Normally Godzilla, his dump stat is dexterity. Apparently not this one. He's buffed. He's got an 18 dex at least. Probably higher, the way he just dodges machine gun fire and dodges missiles underwater. Sorry, torpedoes. There's so much about this where I'm just like, oh man. And I mean, I almost audibly scoffed with the coming down and almost stepping on Hank Azaria. But he's just right between the toes. I'm like,
well, that's Emmerich. That's Emmerich humor right there.
Yes.
Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, they're coming off of their Independence Day high when they were given this to do.
Yeah.
And it's their style, which is kind of interesting because Stargate, for the most part, even though it has humor and stuff, it was a fairly serious sci-fi film. I mean, it had its humor and its moment and its lighter moments and such. And I would have almost liked that type of approach with this, and we kind of get that, but we get a lot of that Emmerich humor that we started seeing more of in Independence Day, and then especially here. The making light of the fact that there's many people being crushed by Godzilla as he's walking through Manhattan. The music doesn't change. It's actually kind of light and airy. you know, and
Yeah, it's more like Godzilla's Day Out than it is.
Yeah, it's like Godzilla's Day Out. Now, like as Dawn mentioned, there's good and bad in this film. Just to touch on my experience, when I saw the trailer for that first teaser trailer, which actually was a really decent teaser trailer, the kids and that in the museum and showing the fossils and going, oh, and all of a sudden they hear the thud and the Godzilla foot comes through the skylight. And it's a little different Godzilla foot, but that's all we saw for a little while. And I was like, okay, you know what? I can kind of get behind this. And then I saw the monster design and I was kind of like you, Glenn. I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, fine. We'll go that route. But then during this film, they make it so he's not a dinosaur. They explain it away in here. And I guess this is where my problem came with this, is because they call it a Godzilla film, but this really has no, outside of the opening scene with a boat getting, once again, getting attacked. It doesn't really feel much like a Godzilla film. It feels forced as a Godzilla film. So you go in there with a little bit different idea, and here they completely change what type of creature he is. He's no longer a dinosaur. He's actually a nuclear mutated sea iguana, which explains why he can swim really fast and he's a faster lizard. And it's like, okay, so now he's not a T-Rex, only for them to take the last, third of this film, like the last almost hour of this film, and make him a dinosaur, basically, with his babies the way they are. Like you guys said, Jurassic Parked it. It was like they were throwing ideas against the wall, and I'm like, and it felt like two movies, which I kind of want to get in here, is
radiation finds a way, Mark. Radiation finds a way.
Radiation, nice. I like that. Radiation finds a way. The first half of this film, and Dawn, I want to make sure I'm not off on this, but first maybe 90 minutes or so of this film, or hour to 90 minutes, it feels a lot lighter in tone and very comical and everything. And then there's a point, Ian Matthew Broderick's character is kind of the bumbling scientist type of guy who has his Instamatic camera, his disposable camera, which he's taking pictures of Godzilla with. But then all of a sudden his character suddenly gets a little more serious, and the film actually takes a bit more serious tone, even when they Jurassic Park it. Did you get that feeling too? Does it feel almost like there's almost two different movies in tone in this one film?
Not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I think, number one, I'm not entirely certain that Matthew Broderick was appropriately cast for the role, because he definitely, his Ferris Bueller and that humor was not what was needed for this role.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it wasn't so bad. It was definitely a little lighter, because I think he was supposed to be more innocent and wonderstruck, right up until the point where, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, the female reporter person.
The female reporter. I've got her here.
Lucy. No, not
Lucy.
Lucy.
Lucy
Audrey.
Audrey was.
Audrey.
Yeah.
Lucy is the one attached to Frank Azaria's character.
Yes.
Right up until the point where he gets like unreasonably jaded because Audrey steals the French tape.
Right.
And that's kind of where it turns. That's kind of a little bit before it turns darker, but I think the character has a lot more wonderment of, wow, this is really happening. This is like my dream. I've been chasing these worms, and all of a sudden there's something much bigger and more grandiose going on here. And I don't think the humor goes away. I think that I just don't think that Matthew Broderick was able to reconcile the two different emotions. It was either Ferris Bueller comedy or something that meant to be something darker, but really just missed. Because a lot of the facial expressions he used later on during the chase and during the more serious scenes were just wrong.
Yeah. Well, part of I actually liked his character in some of the scenes where he was with Jean
Reno.
Yes, Jean. Thank you. The name I was trying to figure. My brain blocked for a minute. Thank you. Yes, Jean Reno, the French Secret Service. I actually liked him in that section of the film. His character. I was like, this is cool. He's still a little bit lighter character, but a little more serious. But yeah, I think was one of the first kind of stumblings was his character and casting him. Cole, how do you feel about Matthew Broderick within this film?
I thought it was, for me, and I see entirely what Don is saying. Like I can see that viewpoint because I think I probably shared it for a while, but I don't know. Watching it again tonight, I thought he was just perfect. I mean, it's what they're going for is sort of, like so many summer blockbuster filmmakers. They're trying to mimic Spielberg. They're trying to take these big special effects that are at times supposed to be frightening and mix it with this, really cutesy humor, that is more family friendly. And it's a balance. It's back and forth. And I'm sure a lot of it is found in the editing. And I think they got it a lot better with their previous two movies before this. Independence Day and Stargate. Yeah. I think they sort of copy that Spielberg style a lot better with those two. This one it's off, like the balance between the humor and the monster is off, and that may be because of the monster's design, which I'll save for later. But I think actually Broderick helps carry this movie. There's I don't know, there's an intrinsic sadness to Broderick, and maybe that's just me. I might be the only person on God's green earth to say that, but there's something really sad in his eyes, especially in his later performances, that sort of helps you sell the idea that, maybe you should have sympathy for this giant iguana. So I sort of, I like him in this role. I mean, he even makes, like what the worms appear in the dirt. I think he's really good in that scene. I mean, what other actor could pull off singing in the rain in a scene where it's pouring rain and not have it seem like a scene from Naked Gun, which it may seem like to some people. But to me, I just thought tonight watching it again, I thought, well, this is he's really good. And, the actors are good. And I like the characters, even though I like the most recent Godzilla. What was that from 2014 that Gareth Edwards did?
Yeah. It's
almost like I like the characters in this better. I mean, they're not as realistic, but they're more colorful and they're more memorable. And it's almost like I would have liked to have seen the Godzilla design from the 2014 film in this movie. But yeah. We'll get into that later. I don't want to ramble. But I liked Broderick, short story long.
And Glenn, with Mr. Matthew Broderick, how'd you feel about him?
Fine. I don't really have a big problem with any of the actors in this.
Would you say that there was a switch in tone, like a drastic switch, like there's two different films in here, or am I just the only guy off on that?
No, there absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of the problem is that I don't think they knew exactly. I don't think they really knew what to do with Godzilla. They're like, how do we do this? Because we don't want to be just like the Japanese, because we think American audiences won't respond to that. So we got to do this other thing. But we still want to be true to Godzilla, but we're not going to be true to Godzilla. So, yeah. But I don't blame the actors for that. I blame direction and writing.
Yeah, the direction and writing, while revisiting this film again, because we've got Matthew Broderick's character who I kind of agree with Don. I mean, he does do fine in it, but I think he was miscast, much like I thought Jack Black was miscast in the King Kong film. It just some actors for the role that they're in aren't picked quite right. But we've got kind of these over the top characters like Kevin Dunn's Colonel Hicks, who I actually liked. I really liked Kevin Dunn's Colonel Hicks, or Harry Shearer playing the sleazy reporter who is willing to give Matthew Broderick's old flame a chance if she just has dinner with him, to Jean Reno's Philippe. You've got all these outrageous characters. I'm looking at them and watching all these Godzillas for Godzilla month. I'm realizing, I'm like, were they trying to make a sequel almost to the Godzilla 85 American cut? Mm-hmm. In some ways, because the way those characters were, like this general and the soldiers, it almost felt like Emmerich was pulling from that. Glenn, did you kind of get a vibe from that this kind of had that 85 American cut where with the American scenes, with the way some of these characters were?
Possibly. I hadn't thought of it before, but I mean, you bring it up, I'm like, maybe.
Yeah, because the general and his was his lieutenant or his sergeant, excuse me, O'Neill, those two played off each other similar to the way the 85 general and his colonel played off each other, and just the tone with some of the military guys and some of the other characters, I thought it felt kind of like a sequel to 85. What about you, Cole? You watched Godzilla 85 with us. What do you think?
Man, I hadn't noticed that, but as always, you consistently kind of blow my mind with your observations. I can see it again now. I mean, the next time I watch the two of these, which I'm sure I'll do a marathon at some point because I need to catch up on a lot of them, I'll pay attention to it. I can see it. I guess I can see it, man. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is an American, just like the American 85 version. We did have lots of product placement too, did we not, Dawn?
Yeah, we did. Holy cow, we did.
Well, we're talking we're talking the 90s here, late 90s. So by now, the big blockbuster is kind of becoming a little bit more regular. They're planning it. They're getting more licensing. I mean, just off the top of my head, I made notes here. You had UPS, MetLife, Pepsi, USA Today, Polaroid, Blockbuster, Swatch, and those were all the ones who actually had their names within frame. I mean, so you got your product placement, just like the 85 one. And that's what kind of triggered for me, and why I bring it up was thinking back to the 85 one and going, wow, is Emmerich going for that? Because you got that humor just like you had in some of those 85 American scenes, and you got the massive product placement. So, maybe he was trying to bring it full circle or trying to play off something similar to that. I'm not sure, but, most of it takes place in New York, which I was impressed with, that we do get a lot of New York, and they handle this first act of getting Godzilla to New York. I'm just not sure. Do we have to have the one Asian gentleman to say Godzilla? Don, do we need that scene? I mean, I'm like, really?
God. Do we need it? Probably not. I don't know. I mean, as a teeny tiny little homage to the very first original Legend of Gojira, the 1954, it's a nice little touch, but necessary not to be that big of a plot point.
No, I didn't think it. I mean, and they were trying to show that these guys who you weren't sure, these Frenchmen who were recording that interview, it kind of, okay, they're investigating this this lizard, but you're not quite sure what their intentions are with it. And I thought these characters were interesting, and it was part of the film I actually enjoyed. Was even though I didn't quite like the sheer amount of jokes they tried to make Jean Reno do. Those jokes fell a little flat for me just because they felt forced. But Cole, what'd you think of the French Secret Service men in this and that storyline, adding it that they were trying to make up for the mistake they made? Because yes, folks, the French nuclear tests are the reason why we have a new Godzilla.
Go ahead, Don.
As you mentioned at the beginning, it was French Polynesia and the nuclear testing. That's exactly where it was in the original Godzilla.
Mm-hmm. So it was it's the same island. So they were hearkening back again to the original one, and they had the Polynesian. So they're taking the blame for Godzilla. But Cole, what did you think of this storyline with the French Secret Service hunting Godzilla?
It kind of made me chuckle a little bit. He pulls it off because he's an amazing actor. And the stuff with the bit with the gum, I thought was funny. I have to admit, it makes us look more American. And then the Elvis accent, I thought was kind of funny. But again, it's not, funny in a way that 1998 funny. I'm not, you know what I mean? It's not like I'm like laughing out loud the way I did during the latest Thor or something. It kind of made me giggle. He's a good actor. What I did think was there is a bit of filler in this movie, and I think those guys work better than the Siskel and Ebert guys, which I think is a joke that hasn't aged so well. And to be honest, it didn't bring laughs when I saw it in the theater, although I totally get it's a justified gag, and I get it. Like, I totally get it. Even as a Siskel and Ebert fan, I get it. But I just don't know if it works in this movie the way they maybe thought it was going to,
Yeah, some of the humor didn't work with their jokes, but when they weren't doing the humor, I kind of enjoyed their element of these guys working on their own hunting for Godzilla. Glenn, how'd you feel about Jean Reno and the French Secret Service?
I love Jean Reno. I think I like him as an actor a lot. You had mentioned the jokes with him, which no, Jean Reno. It's not that he doesn't have a sense of humor or that he doesn't do jokes in any of his movies, but this is not the style of joke that I think works for his type of character. And especially in this film, the jokes were just not. No, that wasn't his character at all. The way that they had him written and the way he was acting, it didn't fit with what was going on with his character. I liked the whole thing. Fine, the French are in here, looking for Godzilla as well. That's fine. Is it necessary? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, as Cole said, there's a lot of padding. So they just had to have this extra thing in there. So let's have these French guys who are like, hey, you stomped on our, Polynesia. we're gonna Godzilla you back. Grr, Frenchness. So it's I don't know. I think they tried to. It's the same thing that I think happened with the last Godzilla movie. Is that these movies should be, there should be some undertone of the environment, or in the case of many of them, it's the environment and radioactivity and pollution and whatnot. But don't overcomplicate it, man. Keep it simple. It's still a giant freaking monster that's destroying a city.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is, and it did feel like they were trying to add almost too much to it. It's like they didn't really. It makes me wonder what the original script may have been without cuts in it. It felt like padding, and these guys did feel like padding, though I did enjoy their characters outside of the humor. Don, how'd you feel about this storyline and working in the French with them being once hunting Godzilla.
I didn't mind it at all.
Mhm.
I like John Renault. I didn't see him. I didn't really. I felt like his attempt at humor was, well, some of it was meant to kind of make him more amenable to the Matthew Broderick character.
Right.
Because that was where a lot of it was happening with that with those interactions. I mean, his mocking American coffee, that just appeals to me because that's what we do. But otherwise I didn't really view it as all that different as in the Japanese versions, the Americans swooping in and trying to take over or strong arm the Japanese investigations into Godzilla. I didn't see it as all that different.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was actually better done.
Yeah, I thought it was too. Actually, they were the part that I enjoyed most. I actually really found that it interesting because it's one of the things that they actually handle well with these guys, because these guys show up at the initial attack where the boat's on shore posing as insurance guys, which they do throughout most of the film, and you aren't quite sure who they are. And I thought, at least in this respect, they did a good job of keeping a mystery to them till it's revealed of who they actually are. Because, we have seen Jurassic Park at this point, so you almost wonder, wait, are they hunters? Are they maybe trying to capture Godzilla? Because, come on, it's not out of the realm of possibility someone wanting to capture Godzilla rather than kill him. Not that you could. But with Godzilla, yes, we mentioned earlier that they changed his origin to where he's a sea iguana now. He's not a nuked from out of the depths of the Cretaceous period or Jurassic period, excuse me, a T-Rex. He is a mutated sea iguana, and they completely changed his design. And outside of his head and maybe from one shot from the top, really didn't look like Godzilla much at all. Glenn, what'd you think of the look of Godzilla in this overall?
I accepted he was going to look different. I mean, I wasn't happy with how he looked, but I realized that, I knew being a American film and, Emmerich, I'm like, they're going to CG it. They're not going to have a guy in a suit because that's not what Hollywood does anymore. So they're definitely going to CG this. It'll look completely different. It'll look, they'll try to make him look more, I don't know what the right term I want to use is.
Streamlined?
Yeah, but can't think of the exact term I'm trying to think of here.
Modern. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, more modern design.
They wanted to modernize him,
make him faster, just like we need running zombies, because schlepping zombies just aren't scary. A lumbering Godzilla through Manhattan really isn't scary, but running Godzilla.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Was it really, Don?
Yeah, exactly. When shambling zombies became kind of, you can just walk past these. Why are you even scared of them? They made the running zombies. And that's exactly what they did here. Who the hell could possibly be scared of Godzilla? He's giant. He falls over for no reason at all. He drop kicks other slow-moving, big-ass creatures. And he's slow and lumbering. What's possibly scary about that?
Mm-hmm.
Gotta do something to make him fast. That's same exact thing, zombies.
Yeah, it came to me as well. I was watching this. I'm like, so that's what they were trying to do. And Cole, you've alluded to it. You've kind of itched at it. Your feeling with the design of Godzilla?
It's always bugged me a little bit, man. And I figured out tonight why. Not that that it's a huge revelation. I'm sure many people have had it, but it's not so much that they redesigned him or the look of him. I can totally see that again, especially for the era. When fandom information wasn't so immediate, when you couldn't just Google something and find out, oh shit, if we change it this much, there's going to be a huge backlash. I can see that, and I can even see making it look kind of iguana-esque, more lizard-like, and having it move faster for the reasons Dawn mentioned, and also, to service the plot, to have it lay these babies. The problem is that they missed a principal rule in designing a monster like this, and it's an important one. And it has to do with the face and specifically the eyes. Everything from Spielberg's T-Rex to Cronenberg's Brundlefly has taken great lengths to make sure the eyes and the face can emote, that you can connect to it. Brundlefly doesn't have fly eyes.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have insect eyes, and that was a very conscious decision. You've got to have some sort of that's why the original Godzilla, I think, works so well. Aside from being just a great design, the eyes and the face has some attitude. In fact, I was thinking about this tonight. The lizards in the opening credits of this movie have more personality than the face of this Godzilla. Why couldn't they make him more lizard-like? Give his eyes some reality, so they're like darting around. That would have been more, it would have drawn you in more. It would have made you more sympathetic. This thing, like Glenn mentioned, is, it's been Jurassic Parked out. It looks kind of like a T-Rex, but you can't even barely see its eyes. There's a couple close-ups of the eyes, but they, in my opinion, with all due respect to the people who worked on this, specifically Patrick Tatopoulos, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. He's a talented guy. A lot of his set designs, really, his work I took note of before I knew his name, like his work on the Underworld movies and what else did he work on? Silent Hill. He's done some stuff that I'm like, wow, who the hell is in charge of the visual designs? I just think it was an error somewhere along the line. Sometimes you get a bad idea and you run with it, and it harms the movie. And this design, just specifically the head, does not work. You don't connect to it.
Cole, you just said something that made me think. You know what they did? I think what it feels like they did now that you talk about his face. He's got that kind of like that hunched, scrunched face, and he always looks kind of depressed.
Yeah.
It's like they grunged him.
Yes.
They're like, hey, because Hollywood's always a few years behind what's actually a trend.
Yeah.
They're like, what's really popular right now? That Nirvana. So if we can make Godzilla look like your typical Nirvana fan, depressed in a hoodie.
I think you're exactly right, though. They didn't intend to make Godzilla a character, just an animal. And an animal isn't given the luxury of being able to exhibit emotion or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's you're exactly right, and that's the biggest failure of this film. And one of the biggest complaints I can actually agree with is even at the very end, the most tragic, saddest moment at the end, when Godzilla comes up through Madison Square Garden, there is such a minimal, the only emotion is displayed through the nudging through the rubble and the music.
Indeed.
There is no other emotion that is there.
Yeah, and though they try throughout the film to force a bit of emotion to try to play on, for lack of a better term, a PETA angle with it, where that's the kind of the stance Matthew Broderick character suddenly takes. He's just an animal. You get a few scenes where he doesn't get munched by Godzilla. Godzilla stares at him or stares at another human, and the music's trying to play and trying to get you in touch with, this is just an animal who's, out of their element or whatnot, and man is bad. But you don't really feel that with him because, puppies and dogs, they have expressions as well, and he doesn't have that expression ever, Godzilla, except, yeah, like you said, Don, nuzzling the dead body of one of his babies at the end. And that's just the way they edit that a bit more than anything. And that's the other Godzilla films, you had a little bit more emotions to that character. You could tell when he was pissed. You could tell when he was
yes.
When he was enjoying crashing through things. He was, you could tell when he was doing the tail slide. And yeah, it is a mistake. And this is one of those films where I honestly think it would have done better had it not been Godzilla. I honestly think this film would have been better. And Roland Emmerich, having done Stargate and then coming off of doing disaster porn in Independence Day. Don't get me wrong, I love Independence Day, but by God, that's the penultimate of disaster films until he came out with the sequel to Independence Day, which was even more insane. But he could have, I think, got away with doing just a straight monster film without having to call it Godzilla. What do you think about that, Cole? Do you think maybe this film would have been possibly better received if it didn't have the Godzilla name attached to it?
It would have been, but then, of course, no, absolutely. You're 100% right. I would certainly hold it in higher regard because I love this genre, and I think I love just giant monsters toppling over buildings and smashing buses. And as Glenn said last week, picking up little toy trains. Love that stuff. The problem is, the variables that got Emmerich involved in it. It never would have it never would have been made if it wasn't under the Godzilla umbrella. Just doing some brief research tonight for the podcast, man, I saw Stan Winston's original model. I believe it was a model. One of Stan Winston's original designs before Emmerich took over the project, and holy shit, did it look good.
Yeah.
I mean, Emmerich definitely, I'm sure he was doing what he thought was immediate and what he thought was cool and what he thought would connect to modern audiences. And, he probably thought he was right because his last two movies, really sort of created, I was interested in Godzilla because of those two movies. Stargate took me off guard. I really liked Stargate, and so yeah, I think it would have done better, but then again, it never would have gotten made. And actually, having watched it tonight, I kind of thought, well, I'm kind of glad this exists. And my anger has sort of faded also because of the Gareth Edwards one, which I actually think is really cool. At least the last half hour of it rocks. So I can kind of look at this and go, well, it was a misstep, but I enjoyed watching it. I'm going to pick up the DVD soon for sure, actually.
And Don, how about you? Do you think this film may have been at least better received had it not been Godzilla? Because we really hadn't had a large monster film hit U.S. theaters in quite some time at this point in '98.
Oh, God. Had it not been a Godzilla film, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But people still would have bitched because, oh my God, they're ripping off Godzilla. Oh my God, they're ripping off.
Yeah, no, there is that fear.
Something to bitch about.
Yeah, there is that fear, but yeah, you're not going to win because if they do a big monster film that's not Godzilla, they're just ripping off Godzilla.
Look at what they did with Pacific Rim.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, they're just ripping off Godzilla. Really?
Exactly.
Really? We can't have another kind. Have you watched Japanese cinema at all? Yeah. So you are right. That is probably why that's probably why they wanted to do it under the Godzilla banner, was because of the name recognition. And the fact is, like you said, they may have thought, you know what, we're going to get accused of ripping off Godzilla anyway, so let's just make a Godzilla film. Glenn,
Well,
how
it would have been
about
nice if they had done that.
Glenn, would you have enjoyed it more had it not been a Godzilla film?
Yes. Just like there are 78 Will Smith movies I would like more if they were not titled what they're titled. I don't like it when someone takes a property just to get whatever little bit of name recognition they have.
Yeah.
If you're going to change it that much, call it something else.
Sure. I mean, they could have even just tossed a reference to Godzilla saying, wow, is this like the monster in Tokyo? You know, if they really wanted to. Yeah, and for me too, I think when it first came out, especially, I would have enjoyed it more, I think, had it not been a Godzilla film, because I was a huge Godzilla fan of the movies and such. So, you know, here it is, a big popcorn Godzilla film. All right. And I got into it, and yeah, it was just, you know, and I know people say, well, things change. You just got to accept it. I'm like, yeah, but even still, you know, it really had none of that really appealed to me in the beginning that the other Godzilla films had, because it just felt so different. It wasn't Godzilla to me. And revisiting it now, I can see what they were doing. I think the film could have maybe 45 minutes trimmed from it, and you make a better film than what they have. You know, because you've got that the whole almost relationship thing with Matthew Broderick and you know, with his Topolopoulos and his reporter girlfriend, well, ex-girlfriend, who still, you know, he holds a candle for. You've got that kind of storyline in there, which really I don't think they needed to explore that much. But that was just like, you know, the love. I think they were going for the angle, just like you had the kind of love story in the first one too, you know. So maybe that was them trying to give a kind of an ode to that. But and watching it again too, and I think we won't go too much longer tonight. But watching again too, I think, what would you think, Dawn, if they would have ended the film? It spiffed it up a little, but ended the film where the submarines or whatever actually get Godzilla, and maybe they come up with a way to where, you know, he just was stunned and wakes up, and then they have kind of a battle with him and they chase him off, versus what we got, which was Godzilla Jurassic Park 3. Did you mind the ending at all with all the baby Godzillas? Do you think it could have ended?
I didn't mind it. My kids loved it. It got them into the rest of the Godzilla movies. It served a purpose. If it would have ended there, it would have changed a whole lot of the rest of the story and other subplots, which would have left the film like really lacking. And they would have needed to find some other subplot rather than the nesting and the pregnant whatever.
Right.
It would have changed the film significantly, which, for good for bad, it doesn't necessarily matter. They could have definitely handled that whole thing a whole lot better. You didn't need the alien horde.
Yeah, you didn't need so many. I mean,
you guys keep talking about Jurassic Park. I was expecting Ripley to show up.
Oh, aliens! Yes, when they're coming out of the eggs, especially.
That's a good point. Holy shit!
Yeah, you're onto something there, Don. That would have been awesome had Ripley showed up. She just shows up and just starts mauling the baby Godzilla. but that's a fanfic that, if anybody out there who writes fanfic, there you go. There's an idea. Copyright Spoiler Room. Copyright Dawn. Actually, she came up with that idea, so make sure she gets her cred for that. But Cole, what do you think? Do you think if they could have possibly rewritten this without having the baby Godzilla 40-minute act?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, as long as we're talking fan fiction, I can understand why that sequence is there. It may have been a studio suggestion, but it's handled poorly, as Dawn mentioned. It's way too cutesy and it's way too long. What do they slip on gumballs and shit?
Gumballs and basketballs.
Yeah. I mean, I can see doing that sequence to appease sort of modern audiences and your studio execs, but to have it go on that long, these things are way clumsier than their parent, and it's not just because they're young. It's like they're moving so slow. And B2, you gotta realize it's not half as good as the Jurassic Park stuff. So why draw it out that long? I can see, one sequence where they just burst out of the eggs. Our lead characters escape, and then the
bombers come in and blow it up.
I was gonna say the dad or the mom, and I realized it was asexual. But that's another gripe I got. I would have liked for this thing to have been the mother, and then you end the movie on a cliffhanger with the father rising out of the center of the ocean. It would have been cool to have like a female Godzilla, and then like leave the ending, as long as we're talking fan fiction, leave the door open for like, the dad to come and seek revenge for his whole family. That would have been awesome. But yeah, I think the whole Velociraptor section is extremely mishandled and as clumsy as the little creatures themselves. Actually.
Yeah. Well, and then how they escape as well. But I'll save my opinion for a moment. But Glenn, just how about you? We'll get your opinion on this to close out this question of do you think they could have ended it differently to where you'd rather knock out the Godzilla and then maybe we have some other direction where they take it where Godzilla wakes up and still stay focused on the big lizard rather than the 40 minutes with the baby Godzillas?
I think you just ended with Matthew Broderick going, well, where is it now? And someone just says, we have men working on it. He's like, who? Top men. And then just go to some underground facility and have Godzilla there.
Dude, that's badass ending right there.
Yeah.
Godzilla's actually captured by the U.S. Navy under some underground secret lair, and they say top men. Yes. And then you leave it open for a sequel that way. There you go.
Big ass cryogenic chamber.
Yeah, a huge cryogenic chamber. For me, yeah, I think they could have handled this differently and trimmed it out. I know where Dawn's coming from with the, you have to have the subplots handled differently, but I think you could tie it up with those with a little extra writing and take out a chunk of this film where they're doing that, or they could have handled it a little bit differently. What I found interesting was the CGI in this, even for 98, is rough, but there are still quite a number of practical effects in here. So we've got to give them props there. They did use a chunk of practical effects in here, both with the Zilla and with its babies. In fact, I think they built, were those city miniatures, or was that all a CGI set for the miniatures?
I'm not sure.
Cities, because those looked like it. They made it look like miniatures, which I think they were going for, which I kind of dug.
Yeah.
With it, but yeah, for 98, even though Zilla kind of just didn't look that great in a lot of shots, it felt rushed there. And the film has its issues, but I will say I did find some entertainment in it. I found the part all the way up to Madison Square Garden actually decent. It could have used some tweaks, or I shouldn't say decent. I didn't hate it like I did before, but I still found a lot of issues with this film. And and I think the biggest misstep though was really the sheer changes they made to Godzilla. I know they were trying to modernize it and you should do something different with a remake, but I think they went a little too far. And I guess we'll wrap up with the final question tonight and that. And what do you think the biggest misstep is, if we haven't covered it already, that they may have made with this? Glenn, what besides making the film, what do you think the biggest misstep was with Godzilla?
Not letting Japan make the film.
Oh, yeah. You think that it just would have been handled differently, right?
Yes.
Because they've done it many times.
They've done it many times, and I'm not saying all the Godzillas are great, but they're all better than this.
Mm-hmm. Would you have felt at least a little better had they used a guy in a suit
Yeah, absolutely.
and done miniatures of New York City, which would have been cool to see.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Glenn's like miniature Manhattan getting destroyed by a guy in a suit Godzilla. Now that's the American Godzilla film I think Glenn wants. We'll remake it, Glenn. We'll do that. We'll start a crowdfunding and we'll remake it. So
yeah,
there we go. Don, how about you? Overall, not a horrible film. Lots of warts on it, but what would you say is the biggest misstep this film had?
Since we already discussed the whole not making him an actual character thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say the biggest misstep was actually killing him.
Oh, sure. Actually killing him on the bridge
On screen. Yeah,
on screen.
yeah. That shouldn't have happened. Not in a Godzilla film. He's either chased away or left wounded so that he can return. And in this one, they were very clear about the light going out in his eyes, and that was a huge misstep.
Mm-hmm. Would have been better had they kind of missiled him and he falls in the Brooklyn Bridge into the water and sinks, leaving it kind of ambiguous whether or not he did actually escape out of it or not.
Yeah.
Rather than having him physically actually die there and having the touching moment with Matthew Broderick coming up to his corpse and looking at him as the eye.
Yeah, touching.
It was touching, but at the same time, I wanted to see Godzilla do one final villain burst and just munch him.
Yeah, Matthew Broderick was touching the blonde.
Of course, they were in the most indestructible cab in the world in that third act too, so they could resist a Godzilla bite and fly everywhere. It was like Fast and the Furious cab. It was awesome. And Cole, what about you? Biggest misstep, would you say, with the Godzilla film?
Well, we already discussed the design, but it kind of ties into the biggest problem, which is that, and this is nothing against, the director or the producer or anything, but the filmmakers were too cool for school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the biggest mistake is not only within the design, but just in the attitude of the movies. These gentlemen made one of the biggest disaster pictures of all time. They're handed Godzilla, and they don't take advantage of the strengths of the original story at all, for no good reason, really. Mm-hmm. They came up with some amazing action sequences. The helicopter chase through the buildings is great for its time and place, but Godzilla is not an action movie. I was just listening. Our buddy Andrew Shearer had a podcast out today, and he mentioned that there's no reason to, just like a remake or a reboot, unless there's something in there that distinctly betrays the essence of the character or the notion of the story. And they really push it here. They really push it. They just push the notion of what a Godzilla movie can be. And I actually like it. I can stand here now, 20 years old, and say, wow, that's great. But it's as you guys have all mentioned so much more eloquently than me, it's not a good Godzilla movie because they just, I have never heard interviews of them about this, but it really seems like they just threw out the source material and they were just going to do their own thing, and they were going to do what they thought was cool. And I think they might have just studied a little bit more.
Yeah. And all of you make great points with the biggest misstep. And for me, one of them is, I guess one of the biggest missteps is that it went too long almost. It's one of those films where most monster films, unless you're really adding something, I mean, even films now today in modern films, they're all 2 hour mark or above. And I'm like, especially for a monster film, you want your monster film, but you don't need 2.5 hours of it, unless you're really adding something to it. And here it didn't feel like they were adding much. It felt like for me, it was a sequel to 85. And for me, one of the biggest missteps was just how long it went and how much they tried to cram into this film. And now we know a little more 20 years later with, and we kind of suspected back then, but now with the veil pulled back a little more with how producers get their fingers in the pot with like the Avengers films and that. And, we've heard stories of directors who had a lot of shackles put on them, more or less, because of producers. It makes me wonder if this film had a lot of producer input into it, studio execs into it more so than what they maybe really wanted to do. I'm wondering if there was some of that, because here they were basically given this, and Emmerich and Dean Devlin wrote the initial screenplay, but as we also all know, that screenplays get chopped up as the film gets filmed. And producers, they were producers on here, but there were a number of other producers in here as well. And I just wonder if the studios had a lot of input on this, on what actually type of film they wanted. And they're like, okay, we'll put it in because they had this important historic license and they were actually given an opportunity to make a Godzilla film, which wasn't given to US studios that often. So they wanted to really go big and go large,
Actually, I read that Emmerich is not a big Godzilla fan and really took everything but the name and wanted to separate from it entirely.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that explains it then. That fully explains.
Jesus, really? Is that an interview with him?
It's on the trivia information.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that explains everything then. And I should
Yeah.
have done my research. I do apologize to everyone in my crew here. I should have, but no, that's a good, I'm glad you pointed that out, Don. Well, that explains it all then. Exactly. His approach to the Godzilla film. So like it or hate it, folks, it is 20 years old. Again, that was just unintentional planning as well, because I wasn't expecting it, but it is an anniversary for it. 20 years ago it was released, and it is around, and even Toho has made fun of Zilla, as people call it, because as many people hate it. And they made fun of it in, I think it was Godzilla Final Wars.
Actually, they have Toho has actually incorporated it as part of canon, which is why they changed the name to Zilla.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm sorry. That's what I meant. Thank you, Don. You definitely interpret Mark very well. Thank you. That's what I meant is that they did put Zilla in the universe. He's got his own icon and everything on the Godzilla boxes and called Zilla. But they actually have him show up in a Godzilla film. I believe it was Final Wars, the last one that they were going to make. And then they were going to take that break. And then they came out with Shin Godzilla. So they took that 10-year break. So that last one, which I think was Final Wars, correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, the one where he's fighting a bunch of monsters around the world.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. And in one, he shows up in Australia, and it's hilarious. In the other fights, he's fighting a little bit longer with the monsters and that. And he's fighting with classic monsters because it was their kind of send-off for Godzilla, because Toho swore they were going to make another Godzilla film for 10 years, which they didn't. So he's fighting classic monsters. He gets to Australia, and there's Zilla. But they rendered Zilla the most worst CGI I've seen. He wasn't a puppet. He was CGI. And the fight lasts all of like 15 seconds. If I remember it correctly, Zilla is wreaking havoc in Australia. Godzilla comes to shore. Zilla goes after him. Godzilla grabs him, hip throws him into the opera house, of course, because there's a landmark he's got to destroy. Throws him in the opera house and fire blasts him, and that's it. That's the fight. One Godzilla hip throw and a fire blast, atomic blast. Killzilla dead. Just like that. I'm like, wow, they're making a statement there. So I will say that I did not hate this film as much, and it didn't bug me as much now as it did when it first came out, because I was older, wiser, more cynical, however you want to put it. But there are a lot of warts on it, and I can definitely see why people don't like it. But he is technically canon, so good or bad or ugly, he is there. And there you go, folks. So if you have seen Godzilla 98, please, you can go to the Facebook group and let us know what you thought of that film and of this episode and such. And now this is the part of the show where we're going to just have these lovely people tell you where you can find them at when they're not here. So, Cole?
Right on, sir. Thank you for having me. You can find me at Shadows and Lovers Productions on Facebook. I have a movie on Amazon, our 5th movie from our company called The Last Great Horror Movie. Very proud of it. It's on Amazon Prime, so if you have Prime, check it out for free. It's a little micro-budget project we're proud of. And another movie on the horizon for this Halloween called Rise, which is our first stab at an exploitation movie. We're pretty stoked. So, again, thanks for listening, and thanks for chatting with me, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Cole. And Dawn?
I'm actually going to bypass my usual stuff and pimp out something else.
Ooh,
check out the Northeast Wisconsin Horror Film Festival happening in Oshkosh, Wisconsin this November. That's newhorrorfest.com, where you can enjoy local, independent-made horror films from hopefully many from Wisconsin and the local areas surrounding states, but also from all over the world.
Awesome. Yes, it's a great festival. We will be there. And of course, we do usually a show dedicated to that. So check that out. Great stuff there, Don. Excellent plug. And Glenn, how about you, sir? Where can we find you at?
You can find me on Facebook with the B-Movie Bunker, Guy in a Bunker Productions, Mr. Under the RPG. You can also find me with my gaming podcast, The Adventure Party, on gncast.com. Check out guyinabunker.com or follow me on Twitter at guyinabunker. Also on YouTube. And I don't know where else. I'm too many places.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, everyone here, and I hope you enjoyed our listening to Godzilla 98, where it wasn't really a bash fest, but we wanted to explore this film. And I hope it got you interested in it. Check it out yourself. Check out our other episodes. We appreciate you listening. Now, let's just say goodnight, everyone.
Godzilla.
Everyone.
Godzilla.
Godzilla.
It's over now. Credits are done. Go home. Go home now.